Hello, class. Today, for this week, we're going to be talking about Chapter 3, Memory. As with all the chapters of this book, you also need to read the chapter from your book and not only listen to the guided presentation. This chapter is important because talking about memory techniques can actually help you boost your skills for test taking, reading, note taking, and many other tasks. If you learn adequately from this chapter, you can learn to focus your attention, make conscious choices about what you remember, and recall facts and ideas with an easier way. And hopefully, this chapter is a good introduction to memory skills that you could utilize later so that your memory can have its full potential. As with all the chapters, I want to talk about a quote that's going to lead us through this chapter. The quote for this chapter is, "My worst enemy is my memory." What do I want to say about this quote? Definitely there are times when we are very sure that our memory is correct, and it can be something that is actually incorrect, and in that case your memory is your worst enemy. Sometimes memory can mislead us. We are going to be learning about some of these faults in memory as well. But definitely if you learn skills in order to improve your memory, there are going to be less and less instances where your memory is your worst enemy. Let's talk about some of the subjects that will be covered in this chapter. Memory techniques for test taking, reading, note taking, etc. 20 good memory techniques. We're going to talk about your brain, its care and feeding, what are mnemonic devices, how to remember names, focusing your attention, which if you remember from last chapter is one of the 5 values to becoming a master student. So we're going to be talking about focusing your attention, recalling facts, and making conscious choices about what to remember. Memory, by definition, is the probability that certain patterns of brain activity will occur again in the future. That is the definition of memory. In fact, you recreate a memory each time you recall it. Memory is a process, and in psychology, we define memory as the internal record or representation of some prior event or experience. As with any of the chapters from this book, this slide is going to highlight the why we're going to be learning about memory, so it can boost your skills. How, definitely by the end of the chapter you can skim for some techniques you like to try this week. What are the power processes? You can definitely go back to certain pages of your chapter to see what the power processes are for mnemonic devices or memory jungle. And what if I could use a memory to its full potential? That's definitely one of the goals of the chapter. Let's talk about defining memory. This is a chapter that I've used before when I've taught Introduction to Psychology at a different college, and we definitely talk about the brain. Let's talk about memory. Memory is a big part of learning. In order to learn, we must remember what we learned in our past to weave it into our present and then use it in our storehouse of memories in the future. Memory allows us to learn from our experiences and to adapt to ever-changing environments. Yet our memories are also highly fragile. Memory is an internal record or representation of some prior event or experience, the mental capacity to encode, store, and retrieve information. Our memories are not exact recordings of an event. Instead, memory is a constructive process through which we actively organize and shape information as it is being presented to us. Whenever you efficiently encode and decode something new, your brain changes physically. You grow more connections between neurons, and the more you learn, the greater the number of connections in your brain. For all practical purposes, there's no limit to how many memories your brain can process, and there are many memory techniques that we're going to talk about in this chapter. On the slide you're seeing in front of you, memory definition, internal record or representation of some prior event or experiences. There is definitely the image of a brain cut in half, and you could see an image called the hippocampus. This area of the brain that's seahorse shaped is involved in forming and retrieving memories. This is definitely the part of your brain that's functioning when you're creating new memories. Also when you're retrieving memories. So I want you guys to think about memory as a constructive process. So involved in the process of information processing, storage, and retrieval of memories. So memory is a process, step 1, 2, and 3, where information, any memory is processed, stored, and then retrieved. Let's talk about the three-stage model of memory. This is another slide that I talk about in my psychology class. Since the 1960s, the most highly researched and widely used memory model has been the three-stage memory model. So you're going to see step 1, step 2, and step 3 in the slide in front of you. Each stage has a different purpose, duration, and capacity. Short-term memory, or step 1, is used, Short-term memory is used when you look up a telephone number, let's say, and hold it in your memory long enough to make a call. If you don't practice it, you forget it. Think about sometimes when a person has told you a telephone number, and if you don't rehearse it, you forget it, even if they just told you that number a few minutes ago. Short-term memory has a limited capacity. But long-term memory allows you to recall information from day to day, week to week, and even year to year. So if you see in front of you, each box, step 1, 2, and 3, represents a separate memory system. When information is not transferred from sensory memory to short-term memory, it is assumed to be lost. Information stored in long-term memory can be retrieved and sent back to short-term memory for use. So if you notice, before looking at step 1, there is stimulus from the environment. Let's say that somebody is telling you their telephone number and you don't have anything to write with. You just are going to try to remember the phone number. Step 1 is the auditory. So somebody is telling you their phone number. That's the sensory memory storage. If you pay enough attention and you rehearse it, if you notice where it says maintenance rehearsal in step 2, it'll become short-term memory. And if you rehearse that telephone number long enough, then it'll become long-term memory. And then in the future, when you want to, let's say 2 years from now, remember that person's telephone number, you can retrieve it from long-term memory so that it can become a part of short-term memory in the present. Information that is not transferred is lost. So short-term memory, definitely, if you look up the yellow box in the bottom, it says duration up to 30 seconds without rehearsal. So think about somebody giving you their telephone number verbally. I'm gonna just think about a number, 619-948-6483. If you rehearse it long enough, you'll remember it for about maybe 30 seconds to a minute if they told you in the morning. If you don't rehearse it long enough, by the end of the day, you will forget that telephone number. That is the three-stage memory model. Let's talk about the memory jungle. This is going to be located on page 104 of your book. Think about your memory as a vast, overgrown jungle. The memory jungle is thick with wild plants, exotic shrubs, twisted trees, creeping vines. All of this is your memory. It's a jungle. It spreads over thousands of square miles, and it's very dense, and it's all tangled up in there in your memory, in your brain. Your brain being a jungle, the animals represent all of the information in your memory. Imagine that every thought or mental picture or perception you've ever had is represented by an animal in this jungle. Every single event ever perceived by your five senses, sight, touch, hearing, smell, and taste, is a thought animal that has also passed through the meadow and entered your memory jungle. Some of the thought animals, such as the color, let's say, of your elementary school best friend's sweater, are well hidden somewhere in your memory. Other thoughts or other animals, like your cell phone number or your home address, are easier to find. There are short-term and long-term memories in this jungle. Let's talk about these 4 visualizations that are described on page 104 of your book. Number 1, a well-known path. Let's imagine that what happens as a thought, in this case, we will call it an elephant, bounds across short-term memory and into the jungle. The elephant leaves a path of footprints. Brain research suggests that thoughts can wear paths in the brain. These paths are dendrites, string-like fibers that connect brain cells. The more of these connections are activated, it is easier to recall the thought. Let me show you this. This is also a slide I show in my Psychology 101 class. These are the parts of the neuron, not something that I want you to focus a lot on, but because we're talking about a well-worn path as dendrites connecting in your brain to form a memory, let's talk about what a dendrite is. These are the parts of the neuron. If you see above, the dendrites are the ones that receive information from other cells. Those are the little fibers at the end. They act like antennas to receive electrochemical information from other nearby neurons. Those are the dendrites. How do neurons communicate? So when neurons are communicating, they submit electrochemical information from one neuron to the other. The dendrites receive the information, as you can see on the top, which then travel down the cell body, down the axon, which is the sausage-like image in front of you, to the terminal buttons, which then expose the information to the other neuron. Dendrites are these fiber-like pointy things at the front part of the neuron that are going to receive information from other cells. If we go back to this visualization idea, the well-worn path, if you imagine that a thought is going through your brain, let's call this thought an elephant, is going to walk across short-term memory and into your memory jungle. The elephant or the thought is going to leave a path of footprints. And brain research suggests that thoughts can also leave paths in the brain. These paths are the dendrites that we talked about that's going to connect the different memories. And the more of these memories and the more connections that you have in your brain, the easier it is to retrieve a memory or the thought. Let's talk about number 2, herd of thoughts. The second picture you can use to your advantage in recalling concepts about memory is a picture of many animals gathering at a clearing. It is easier to retrieve thoughts that are grouped together. Pieces of information are easier to recall if you can associate them with similar information. For example, you can more readily remember a particular player's batting average if you can associate it with another baseball statistic. Another example, you can remember where a coffee place is if you can associate it with other nearby places. So when we talk about herd of thoughts, this is when we are more able to remember information if it's grouped. Let's say an example for Mesa College, if you're a new student and you're trying to recall what area of the campus counseling is located in, if you know that it's in student services on the 3rd floor, you're more easily going to remember that also the transfer center and the career center are also on the 3rd floor of student services. That's what the herd of thoughts mean. Number 3, turning your back. Imagine that you're playing hide and seek. You turn your back, count to 10, and your friends have disappeared. This is exactly what happens to most of the information you receive. Psychological research shows that when we start to forget information, it's because we just learned it. So as soon as we learn something, we start to forget it. Memory loss occurs within the first 24 hours of not rehearsing information. This means that much of the material is not being encoded or stored. It is just wandering in the memory jungle. So the solution is simple: review quickly. Especially if you've learned something in a class lecture that is very difficult, if you don't review it by that night and practice it, chances are you're going to forget it within the first 24 hours of you learning it. Number 4, direct the traffic. Let's talk about directing animal traffic because of this example. You're standing at the entrance to the short-term memory meadow, directing the animal herds into your long-term memory. You're taking an active role, you're paying attention, you are rehearsing, you are directing what information goes where. When you direct traffic in the sense of you actually practicing and reviewing information, this is what you need to do. For best memory storage to happen, you need to review quickly before the first 24 hours leave, and you need to tell your brain where you want the information to go. Make sure you view the video on this slide by right-clicking and pushing play. I will also, be posting these slide presentations on Blackboard, but I want you to view it before you actually go through my presentation or at the same time, because I want you to have a video representation of what I'm talking about when I talk about the memory jungle. Let's talk about memory techniques. Your book is going to describe 20 different memory techniques starting on page 106 of your chapter. Let's experiment with these techniques. At any time, you can experiment with these techniques. These 20 techniques are divided into 4 categories, which represent a principle for improving memory. Organize it. So organizing information is easier to find. That's the category 1. Category 2, use your body. Learning is an active process. Get your senses involved in order to improve your memory. The other category is using your brain. Work with your memory, not against it. And the other category is recalling it. Regularly retrieve and apply key information. Let's talk about these 20 different memory techniques. The first one under organizing it is be selective. During college life, you will be exposed to an overabundance of information. I personally cannot recall every single detail that I learned in every single class of my undergraduate career, but I can recall the majority of information in regards to my major, which was psychology, and details from subjects I truly enjoyed and were not from my major. Because I definitely liked history and world religions and art, those are things that I remember clearly from those classes. The art of memory is selecting what to remember. As you go through this class, personal growth, select things you find interesting and helpful and store items into memory. I do not expect you to remember every single thing you learn in this class after it ends, but I'm confident you will remember things that matter to you. Excuse me. When you're reading a book chapter, look for summaries, previews, and review questions. Pay attention to things in bold and italics and tables and charts and images. And when a professor lectures, make sure you listen to things that are emphasized, things that are on the board or on the PowerPoints, or that the professor repeats. Those are definitely key things. Let's talk about making it meaningful. We remember things better if they are meaningful to us. If you organize items into categories, it is easier to remember. By chronological order, by importance, major events versus minor events, as a step-by-step process, alphabetically, by spatial order, and by timeline. Basically, if you organize items into categories, it is easier to remember. Let's say you want to organize in your brain the different classes you have this summer semester. Remember them by chronological order. What class starts in the morning, which one in the afternoon, and which one at night. That way you'll remember probably the class section, the class time, the professor's name, and probably the location of your class. Number 3, create associations. The data already encoded in your neural networks in your brain is arranged according to a scheme that makes sense to you. When you add new data, you can remember them more effectively if you associate them with similar or related data. Think about your favorite courses. They probably relate to subjects that you already know something about. If you like politics, you probably will find it easier to remember facts in a modern history course. Before you take upper level courses, master the prerequisite courses. That is definitely something that I will recommend to you as a professor and as a counselor. I know I couldn't have taken upper division psychology and really dove more intensely into, let's say, abnormal psychology without even knowing the beginning of what Psychology 101 is. So create associations. What you learn in one class, you can move to the another. Like I'm telling you right now, I'm giving you lecture slides that I've taught in my psychology class before, my Psychology 101 class. You will probably remember the slides on the brain because you already saw them in the personal growth class. Let's talk about using your body. Learn actively. Action is a great memory enhancer. If you study while standing up rather than sitting or lying on the floor or the bed, it is harder to fall asleep when you're standing up. A lot of students actually like to study standing up as opposed to sitting down, especially study sitting as opposed to lying on the floor or the bed. A lot of people pace back and forth while they're reciting material out loud. This is something that it's a helpful tool. Use your hands as you study. Move your mouth as you study. Read passages out loud. Use a louder voice for main points. Learning actively works well for a lot of students. Actively moving while you're reciting something can definitely help you remember. Number 5, relax. When you're relaxed, you absorb new information quickly and recall it with greater ease and accuracy. Students who cannot recall facts during their final exam can often talk about it later when they are relaxed. So relaxed does not mean drowsy or falling asleep. Relaxed means that you're free of tension, during which your mind is free to play and information can be gathered without feeling threatened. So ideally, you want to learn when you're relaxed. Number 6, create pictures. If you draw diagrams, make cartoons, and use images to connect facts, it illustrates relationships and you can remember quicker. You can see and recall associations within and among abstract concepts more easily when you visualize the concepts and the association. If you see a chart and it has the main topic and the details and a sequence, it is usually easier to remember. I wanted to highlight the scientific method that the majority of us have been exposed to when we went through high school. So if you just talk about the steps in the scientific method, it's probably not as easy to remember if you don't see it in a chart like this, where it has step 1, you question and you do a literature review. Step 2, in the scientific method, you test a hypothesis. You think about a testable hypothesis. Step 3, you begin to research what has already been done out there in order to test this hypothesis. Step 4, you collect data and you analyze. Step 5, you publish what you did. And step 6, you develop a theory. It's probably easier to remember the steps in the scientific method if you see an image or a chart of it. And if you only talk about it, it's definitely going to be not as easy to remember. Number 7, recite and repeat. When you repeat something out loud, you're going to help that concept in 2 different senses. First, you get the physical sensation of your throat and your tongue and your lips voicing the concept. And second, you hear it. The combined result is that you create mental pictures. Talking out loud is important. Your ears are hard to fool. Your mind can trick itself into thinking it knows something, but your ears can recall something better. Also, recitation works best when you are listening to your own words. If you use your own words to put a concept into your own words, it forces you to think about it, and therefore you can learn it better. Some people actually make a song out of it. Like, ever think about why we remember jingles better? There's one in the TV that goes, "State Farm is on your side," right? For an insurance company. When you sing it out loud, it is easier to remember. Think about that. And also writing it down. This technique of writing things down is obvious, yet easy to forget. Writing a note to yourself helps you remember an idea. Even if you never look at the note again, the physical action of writing it down is helpful. Let's talk about using your brain in terms of the different memory techniques. Number 9, engaging your emotions. Let me show you this. Encode by feeling. One powerful way to enhance your memory is to make friends with your amygdala. Your amygdala is the area of the brain that lights up when there's neural activity each time you feel a strong emotion. When a topic excites you, or you love that topic, or it's laughter, or there's fear accompanying that thought, the amygdala sends a flurry of chemical messages to your brain. This is telling your brain this information is important and useful, don't forget it. You are more likely to remember course material when you relate it to a goal, whether academic, personal, or career, that you feel strongly about. This can also be helpful if a topic is boring. Create some interest in it. Find a study partner in class, if possible, someone you know and like. Also consider getting to know the instructor. The human relationship with him or her creates a bridge that makes you engage in the content in a more emotional way. So make friends with your amygdala, encode by feeling. Attach a strong emotion to that information and you will remember it more. And relate the material to a personal goal. Let's talk about overlearning. One way to fight mental fuzziness is to learn more than you need to know about a subject simply to pass a test. You can pick a subject, examine it, add to it, go it over and over until it becomes second nature. So there is no wrong technique with overlearning. The more you learn, the more your memory is going to know about that subject. Number 11, escape the short-term memory trap. Short-term memory can fade in a few minutes, like we talked about, like asking a friend for their phone number long enough to save it into your iPhone and then you forget it a couple of moments later. See whether you can recall it the next day. You probably won't. Short-term memory can fade after a few minutes, and it rarely lasts more than several hours. So definitely the key message here is review. Number 12, use your time of peak energy. Study the most difficult subjects when your energy is at its peak. Some people can do it more effectively during daytime hours or late afternoon than in nighttime. Number 13, distribute learning. As an alternative to marathon study sessions, have shorter sessions spaced out over time. You might find that you can get far more done in 3 2-hour sessions than you can in one straight 6-hour session. Reward yourself after the 2-hour session by eating something, calling a friend, reading your emails. So intervals are something that is really helpful. Also, number 14, beware of attitudes. People who think history is boring tend to have trouble remembering dates like historical facts. All of us forget information that contradicts our opinions. If you are, say, super interested in cars, you might really know about the make and the model and the speed and the technology of the car. Being aware of your attitudes means that you notice them and are willing to put them on hold for the greater good. Number 15, elaborate. Consciously encode new information. Repetition is one basic way to elaborate. Take-home message here, repetition. Number 16, intend to remember. This means that you should intend to learn it now rather than later. Like wanting to remember a lecture, pretend at the end that there will be a quiz. So trick your mind, intend to remember. Let's talk about the recalling techniques. Number 17, remember something else. When you are stuck and can't remember something you're sure you know. So remember something else. When you're stuck and can't remember something you're sure you know, remember something else that is related to it. If you can't remember, let's say, your great aunt's name, remember your great uncle's name. If you cannot remember the name of a structure of the brain, let's say for a class, for your psych class, if you're taking that, remember the name of something connected to it or what it does. Brainstorming is a good memory log. This happens to me sometimes. I don't know about you, but I do enjoy the Avengers movies, let's say that, and I want to remember a character's name, and I can remember that. I can remember, let's say, another character's name, and then be able to remember the previous name that I want to remember. So brainstorming is a good memory log. Number 18, notice when you do remember. Everyone has different memory style. To develop your memory, notice when you recall information easily and ask yourself what memory techniques you are using naturally. Number 19, use it before you lose it. Even information encoded in long-term memory becomes difficult to recall when you don't use it regularly. Example, you can remember your current phone number, but can you remember the one you had 10 years ago? One was practicing it, another is teaching the material to somebody else. So when you practice it or you teach it to somebody else, that is definitely a way for you to use it before you lose it. Teaching means you must master the material first. Number 20, adopt the attitude that you never forget. So instead of saying, I don't remember, start saying, it'll come to me, it'll come to me. Let's talk about mnemonic devices. They can be powerful tools. There are 5 general categories. Make up new words, use creative sentences, create rhymes and songs, use the Lo-Shi system, and use the PEG system. Let's talk about making up your new words. Acronyms are words created from the initial letters of a series of words, like NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration, SDSU, San Diego State University, or STEM, Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math. You can create your own. So definitely making up words by the acronyms is one of the best ways to remember. Use creative sentences. Acrostics are sentences that help you remember a series of letters that stand for something. Example, the first letters of the words of the sentence, every good boy does fine, E, G, B, D, F, are the music notes of the lines of the treble clef staff. So using creative sentences, if you want to use letters or you want to use numbers, but definitely using creative sentences is a way for you to remember. Creating rhymes and songs. This is advertising and why jingles exist, designed to burn their messages into your skull. Like we said, it was the example about the insurance company, that jingle, or at Metro Flooring, remember, for students and for people who want to buy floor space. For some students, I before E except after C. So it definitely is using rhymes and using songs, a way for you to remember. And using the Lo-Shi system. This is an L1. Ancient great orators used to remember long speeches, and politicians use it. I want you to see the next slide for this one. The method of Lo-Shi. So definitely Greek, Roman orators developed the method of Lo-Shi to keep track of many parts of their really long speeches. Orators would imagine the parts of their speeches attached to places in a courtyard. For example, if an opening point of a speech was the concept of justice, they might visualize it in a courtroom placed in the first corner of the garden they would speak about. As they mentally walked around their garden during their speech, they would encounter and order each of the points they want to make. This is definitely one of the most easier ways to remember long speeches. And also the PEG system. It's a technique that employs keywords that are paired with numbers. Each word forms a peg on which you can hang mental associations. Bun goes with 1, shoe goes with 2, tree goes with 3, door goes with 4, 4 goes with door. Fourth Amendment says it's unlawful to search and seize. Imagine people knocking at your door who are demanding to search your home. This amendment says you need a research warrant first. So this is one of the ways to remember using the PEG system. And the last thing I want to talk about in this slide is limitations. Mnemonic devices are memory tricks that works once you know how to use them. They do have three limitations. They don't help you digest, understand information. They simply help you remember it. So they don't help you understand it. They just help you remember it. They may be too complicated to learn or maybe time consuming to develop, and they can be forgotten. Remember, you forget something when you don't what? I'm hoping you're thinking about this word. Review or rehearse. So that brings us to the end of chapter 3 for memory.